You may have heard about the recent shakeup in the real estate industry, but how does that affect you, the buyer or seller, in a real estate transaction in the state of California? I don't want to bore you with details, but there was a lawsuit against the National Association of Realtors. And because of that, there have been some significant changes from state to state. In the state of California, a very litigious state, there are going to be some significant changes in those contracts. So let's go over some of the changes after the recent lawsuit here in California. What is actually going on? Commission splits have always been negotiable. Always. The difference now is that the contracts are going to be very clear about how those compensations are delineated between the buyer's broker and the listing agent. There are three big changes that you should be aware of. One is that the buyers now need to sign a buyer's representation and compensation agreement with their agent before they even see a house. You could have a non-exclusive or exclusive agreement, but that agreement does need to be signed, and your compensation to your agent is negotiated at that point. Here is the contract for the buyers. It's called the Buyer's Representation and Broker Compensation Agreement. This is a sample, I've marked it up. Now buyers are going to be negotiating their compensation with their agent before they even set foot in a house. So this is significant. This is new. In this agreement, you're going to be negotiating how much you are responsible to pay your buyer's broker. Before, it was commonplace that a seller would pay a commission out of the proceeds, the net proceeds, that would go to their agent, and their agent would split it with the buyer's broker. No longer, according to the contracts, this is going to be a big shakeup for the industry, and it's going to be a lot harder for new buyers. That said, I believe sellers are still going to offer that compensation out to the buyer's broker. If you are looking at homes, be aware, if the seller is giving out that compensation, that's good for you. Number two, for sellers, the big contract change is, and as you can see, I've marked this up because I wanted to be very clear on what my sellers are signing. Now we have this clause 4B, compensation to seller's broker, and it clearly says only seller's side of transaction, right there, only seller's side of transaction. But again, so that's the biggest change, is the compensation to the buyer's broker is no longer baked into this contract. So you're going to have those conversations with your listing agent about whether or not you still want to offer that to the buyer's broker. I highly recommend doing that. There's an extra section here, K, additional terms, and this is where I would write if you are comfortable as a seller giving out a commission, a concession, or a compensation, however you want to word it, to the buyer's agent. Highly recommend doing that. It makes it easier for those buyers. You can bake that into the price point, and everything's negotiable again. And number three, the MLS, the multiple listing service, where agents post all their listings, now no longer is going to show what the compensation is for the buyer's broker. So when you have a listing online, before you could look down and see what that commission was going to be for the buyer's broker. No longer. We are not transparent on that anymore. For whatever reason, they decided that it was more important to take that off of the multiple listing service. If you want to know what the compensation is to the buyer's broker, you have to call the listing agent and ask, are they offering a concession? Are they offering compensation to the buyer's broker? That'll be less money for you to have to come up with when you are buying a home. Okay, so we've talked about the buyer representation and compensation agreement that the buyer needs to sign with their agent before they even see a home. We've talked about the residential listing agreement. Now you can only negotiate compensation with your agent, not compensation that will be split between your agent and the buyer's agent. What is actually going on? If there is no compensation to the buyer's broker, which I don't recommend to any of my clients, but if for some reason a seller decides they are not paying anything to a buyer's broker to kind of bring in those clients, then whatever you negotiated in this contract, 2.5%, 2%, 3%, whatever you negotiated in this contract, You, the buyer, are going to be on the hook for it. Yeah, that's going to be the biggest, I think, shift in this industry is that, and it's always been there, but now the contracts make it very clear and actually a little bit harder. Those conversations are going to be a little bit more challenging between the agent and the client to make sure that they are in line on all things compensation. That's a lay of the land of what's going on with this shakeup in the industry. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'm going to go into these further if you'd like. Comment below with questions and I'm happy to answer those for you.